Hello and welcome to this presentation on a literature review. This presentation has been developed by the Academic Writing Centre at Technological University Dublin. Through this video, we will show you and explain how to prepare, organise, write, edit and revise your literature review. It's interesting to point out that experts at the University of Wollongong in Australia remind us that the term literature in this context refers to scholarly publications, a collection of publications, and that the term review is a written discussion of the publications and not just a summary. The importance of discussion, which includes a synthesis of the literature, will be emphasized throughout the presentation. So whether you're carrying out a literature review as part of your dissertation or as a standalone project, this presentation will provide you with valuable guidance and information on this process. First of all, this is the structure of the presentation. So we will start with an introduction to the topic to contextualize the issue, and then move on to looking at the literature review in detail and complementing that with looking at key academic writing competencies that are essential to carry out a literature review successfully, and continue and finish with a conclusion. Before we start, there are a couple of items to note. So this video provides you with a general definition and an outline of the main components of a literature review. It will give you an idea of what is expected. First of all, you should be aware and check the deadline and submission dates so that you can organize your workload accordingly. Discuss these dates with your supervisor and arrange meetings. It's important to note as well the word count limit for your review, for your literature review, so that you can take this aspect into account when planning and structuring your literature review. Also find out what referencing system is used for your school, for your discipline. Is it APA, Harvard, Chicago? Familiarize yourself with this referencing system before you start writing the literature review, so you will save a lot of time at the end in the editing stage. Also, it is a good idea to check dissertations from your discipline in the library. Finally, adopt a system to keep track of your sources and references. Perhaps it's a good idea to use a reference management system such as Mendeley or Zotero. This will also save you time, as you will be able to find your books, articles, journal articles, websites, and you'll be able to use them to prepare and finalize your bibliography for your literature review. In this slide, you can see a representation of the writing process for a literature review. And as you can see, it's represented as a circulatory, iterative process. So this is not a linear process, as you can see. It's loops back and forth as you develop your understanding on the topic. While in the first instance, you need to select a topic and search the literature and read around the topic, and so that you can develop your argument. Through this process, you need to move towards a more focused reading on selected works. As you can see in step 5, critiquing the literature and being critical is concerned with carrying out a sound analysis of previous publications on the topic you're researching and reflecting on their value and relevance, and perhaps even their limitations. Being critical allows you to establish connections between the various sources and to identify themes for your synthesis of the published works to date. It allows you to identify convergence and divergence between the different sources. As you can see here, a literature review is emphasized here, that is both a summary and an explanation of the complete and current state of knowledge on a limited topic as found by exploring many different sources. And in the image there, you can see the different sources. It can be books or journal articles or newspaper articles or statistics, previous theses or dissertations, historical records. So they all present you with the different sources for to be included in your literature review. So as we were saying before, literature in this context is a collection of publications and sources as represented in that image, and the review takes into account not just a summary, but a discussion which includes a synthesis and appraisal of the various sources of information. So it is important to keep a list of the sources, save website URLs using your favorite tool, and also make notes while you're reading. Because if you make notes while you read, you will first understand the topic in more detail, and you will be able to then use it in your writing. Important to question what you're reading and to see its validity and its relevance to your actual project. So while you're reading, start writing down interesting pieces of information, insights into how to organize your review or your thoughts on what to write. This way, by the time you start writing the literature review, you will have a rough draft of the topic. So we move on to this aspect of annotation, and the annotation is also an important way of developing your writing because it gives you a good review and not just a summary of the literature. As it through your annotation, you can identify issues in the sources, what you find interesting, what is new, what is important, problematic, or limited. It allows you to comment on aspects of the sources of what you're reading and how it connects directly to your research project. How does it complement it or contradict it? So comment on how it relates to your own research project. So here you can see an extended definition of a literature review. And as you can see, once more, it highlights this idea of how it is both a summary and a synthesis. This is a quote from a handout by the University of North Carolina, from the Writing Center there. And it also points out to two different types of literature review: standalone assignment, or as part of the preparation or an introduction to a thesis or a report. So what do we mean by critically reviewing the literature? So Pautasso, 2013, you will find his reference at the end of this presentation, highlights that a literature is not stamp collecting. And this is a good image, because a good literature reviews and should not just summarize the existing literature, but discuss it critically, identifying problems and pointing out gaps in the research. So after having read a review of the literature, a reader should have a rough idea of the main achievements in the review fields, the main areas of debate, and also the outstanding research questions. It is also essential to find a focus when researching and writing your literature review. Organize your literature review around ideas or issues, not just sources themselves. Do not simply list your sources. Consider instead what themes or issues connect your sources together. Do they present one or different solutions? Is there an aspect in the field that is missing? How well do they present the material? Do they portray it according to a relevant theory in the field? Do they reveal a theme in the field, or perhaps a trend in the field? Pick one of these themes to focus your review. So in order to convey a focus to your reader, a literature review may not contain a traditional thesis statement, i.e. one that makes an argument, but still you do need to tell readers what to expect from it. So a simple statement that let the readers know what is your main organizing principle. The focus and perspective of your literature review and the kind of hypothesis or thesis argument you will make will be determined by what kind of review you're writing. So in this slide, you can see the structure of the literature review. So it comprises an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And in general, we can say that the introduction and the conclusion represent about 10% of the total overall word count for the literature review, and the body in turn represents the remaining 80%. So first of all, the introduction, its communicative function is to include the topic of the literature review, the central theme, and also the organizational pattern that you have adopted for your literature review. This is followed by the main body of the text, which includes the sources that you're discussing, the discussion of the sources you're discussing, and you can organize this either chronologically, thematically, or methodologically. Finally, the conclusion should cover a discussion of what you have drawn from writing and reviewing the literature so far, and where might the discussion proceed. We're moving now to the key competencies, academic writing competencies that are essential to carry out a successful literature review, and they are synthesizing, summarizing, and paraphrasing. These are key competencies, and you may have already become acquainted with this, but we're going to take them in turn and explain and see how you can use this in your own writing. As you know, a competence is an ability, a skill, and in this regard and in this setting is a cognitive ability to manage material information sources and bring it together, weave it together into your discussion. And in order to do that successfully, you are to understand clearly what a synthesis, a summary, and a paraphrase is. So as we were saying, the first is synthesis, and this involves combining ideas from a range of sources in order to group and present common ideas or arguments. It is a complex and necessary skill used in essays, literature reviews, and other forms of academic writing. The synthesis allows you to combine information and ideas from multiple sources to develop and strengthen your argument. It allows you to demonstrate that you have read widely on the topic, also to use and cite multiple sources, and to acknowledge authors by referencing. So all of this brings together the idea about synthesis and using synthesis in your writing. Summarizing, as you probably know, presents a short and concise representation of the main points, ideas, concepts, facts, or statements of a text rewritten in your own words. So the idea is to keep the author's ideas and intentions, the meaning and details, and the force of the argument, but to say that in brief and in your own words. So again, this is another skill that it's important in academic writing and in carrying out a literature review. Important not to alter the author's original idea. So that is very important here. Paraphrasing, you are probably well aware of what this entails, is rewriting and conveying the author's ideas in your own words. So once again, it involves you transforming the the original text into your own words, but maintaining its meaning and preferably its length. And you need to find a way to differentiate your writing from this paraphrase, and in order to do that, we use what we call introductory verbs or signal phrases, and you can find more about that in those web links there. So you may wish to consult the web links available to you in this slide. Feedback is an important element of the writing process and also of writing a literature review. Literature reviews are normally looked at by your supervisor or by your lecturer, and they will provide you with feedback on what you have written to date. It's important you incorporate that feedback into your writing, as it greatly helps in improving your overall style, focus, and content of your literature review. Feedback is really vital and should be considered carefully. And sometimes you can obtain a diversity of views on your draft. This perhaps may lead to contradictory views on the merits of the paper or on how to improve it. But in such a situation, it is better to consider the diverse views and adopt your final point of view from where your research is going. So a diversity of feedback perspectives on a literature review can help you identify where the consensus view stands in the landscape of the current knowledge and understanding of the topic. As you may know, proofreading is the final process in editing academic work, academic written work. At this stage, you're looking for inaccuracies, inconsistencies, and indeed ambiguities that you have not noticed before. Concentrate on individual sentences. Do they contain a clear, unambiguous message, or are they muddled? Do they lack a clear direction? It is advisable to print a draft of your document, of your literature review, and proofread the text on paper. Make the corrections on paper and transfer them to the electronic copy before you submit your literature review to your lecturer. If you proofread your text, your lecturer or supervisor will be able to concentrate on the content, the concepts and ideas you're exploring in your literature review rather than on minor errors in spelling or punctuation. So the lecturer will be able to give you valuable advice on content rather than form. Here are 10 simple rules for writing a literature review, which are part of an article published by Potasso in 2013. We already made reference to his work before. And as you can see, we have covered these 10 points throughout this presentation. So you can read them in your own time, but it is perhaps useful to have them as a one-pager to guide you through the process of carrying out the literature review for your dissertation or indeed your standalone project. So we're coming to the end of this presentation, and in order to conclude, just a few reminders and take-home messages. So as we were saying, a literature review can be a standalone project or a part of a dissertation or a PhD thesis. It uses a structure to transmit your findings and to provide the reader with a clear direction on how to follow your discussion. It's very important to remember that the literature review is both a discussion and a summary of the literature, of the publications, and that this discussion contains publications and sources that are current and up to date. What a literature review does is that it demonstrates your ability, your competence to engage critically with the literature by using these academic writing competencies which we refer to by synthesizing information, summarizing it, and paraphrasing. And through this process, you may identify gaps in the literature or indeed issues around the methodologies used. So these are the references used in preparing this presentation, and some additional resources that you can find in our website, in the Academic Writing Centre website at TU Dublin, but also at the Writing Centre in University of North Carolina or at the Centre for Academic Writing in Coventry University. Also, you may find useful, particularly in business, this literature review resource from Bradford University School of Management. Also be aware of the APA citation generation, and indeed there are other citation generators for other referencing systems such as Harvard. As we were saying, a reference management system such as Mendeley could be useful for you, and that's a reference, a link that you can check for in your own time. Finally, just to thank you for your attention and your interest, and to remind you that the Academic Writing Centre at TU Dublin supports students in a variety of ways, and you may find information, up-to-date information in our website relating to our one-to-one appointments or thematic workshops. You can also find our email address there. So once more, thank you for your interest in this topic, and hopefully it has helped you understand what a literature review is and how to carry it. Thank you.